Presently, Reese Witherspoon sat down at the view table. Something felt off. Maybe it was the way Joy Behar was shuffling her notes with a little too much purpose. Maybe it was the strange energy crackling through the studio audience. Or maybe it was just that sixth sense that comes from spending 3 decades in Hollywood. That instinct that tells you when someone is sharpening their knives. Whatever it was, Reese Witherspoon, the woman who had built an empire on optimism and determination, was about to face the fight of her professional life on live television. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments, because trust me, you're going to want to talk about this one. So Joy began before the applause had even fully died down, her voice carrying that particular edge that regular viewers recognized as trouble. Let's skip the pleasantries. I want to talk about something real. You've built this whole brand around female empowerment, around lifting women up, around being this beacon of Southern positivity. But let's be honest, how much of that is actually you, and how much of it is just really, really good marketing? The question landed like a grenade in the middle of what should have been a friendly promotional interview. Reese's famous smile flickered for just a moment before resetting itself. Well, Joy, I think my track record speaks for itself. Hello Sunshine has produced dozens of projects centered on women's stories. We've adapted books by female authors that might never have been made otherwise. I've put my money and my time where my mouth is when it comes to supporting women in this industry. But that's just it, Joy pressed, leaning forward with that predatory gleam in her eyes. You've made a lot of money doing it. Hello Sunshine sold for $900 million. $900 million. So, forgive me if I'm a little skeptical when a woman worth that much talks about empowerment. It sounds less like activism and more like very clever capitalism. The accusation hung heavy in the suddenly quiet studio. Whoopi shifted uncomfortably. Sarah Haynes stared down at her notes. The audience seemed to be holding its collective breath. I'm not sure I understand the criticism, Reese said, her voice steady but with a new tightness around the edges. Are you suggesting that making money from telling women's stories somehow invalidates those stories? Because by that logic, no successful woman could ever be a genuine advocate for other women. I'm suggesting that there's a difference between advocacy and branding, Joy shot back. And you, are a master of branding. The book club, the clothing line, the production company, the whole Southern Belle persona. It's all very carefully constructed, isn't it? Every piece designed to sell the idea of Reese Witherspoon, feminist icon. Reese's jaw tightened visibly. My book club has introduced millions of readers to authors they never would have discovered otherwise. My production company has created jobs for thousands of women in front of and behind the camera. If that's branding, then I'll take it. I'd rather be a brand that does something than a critic who does nothing. The counterattack was sharp enough to make Joy's eyes narrow, but she wasn't backing down. Let's talk about the persona for a minute. The sweet Southern girl who just wants everyone to get along. The eternal optimist. But we all remember 2013, don't we? When you were arrested and asked the police officer, "Do you know my name?" That didn't sound very sweet to me. That sounded like someone who thought the rules didn't apply to her because she was famous. The mention of the 2013 incident, when Ree had been arrested after confronting a police officer during her husband's DUI stop, sent a visible ripple through the studio. It was the skeleton in the closet that Reese had addressed publicly, but clearly hoped had been buried by time and good works. I've addressed that incident many times, Joy. I was embarrassed by my behavior. I apologized publicly and privately. I learned from it. I'm not sure what else you want me to say about something that happened over a decade ago. What I want is honesty, Joy replied. Because that moment felt like the mask slipping. The real Ree coming out. The one who thinks she's above everyone else because she's America's sweetheart. The one who uses her privilege when it's convenient and talks about equality when it's profitable. So one mistake made in a moment of fear and embarrassment defines me forever? Reese's voice was steady, but carried a new weight. Is that the standard we're applying? Because if it is, I'd love to know how many people in this room, including you, Joy, would survive that kind of scrutiny. How many moments do you have that you'd rather the world forgot? The question hung in the air, uncomfortable and pointed. That's different, Joy said. I'm not selling myself as some kind of role model. Neither am I. I'm selling entertainment. I'm selling stories. I'm selling the idea that women's lives are worth paying attention to. If people have decided to see me as a role model, that's their choice, not something I manufactured. And I've always been honest about being imperfect. That arrest has been part of my public record for over a decade. I've never hidden from it or pretended it didn't happen. The accusation of hypocrisy was brutal and clearly designed to wound. Reese sat very still for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice had changed. The practiced warmth had given way to something raw, more dangerous. You want to talk about masks, Joy? Let's talk about masks. You sit at this table every day performing outrage for the cameras. You pick fights with guests because controversy gets ratings. You've built your entire career on being the one who says what everyone else is thinking. Except half the time what you're saying is just mean for the sake of being mean. The studio audience gasped audibly. This was not the Reese Witherspoon they knew from talk show appearances. The one who laughed easily and deflected criticism with charm. At least I'm honest about who I am, Joy fired back, her face re-eaning. I don't pretend to be something I'm not. I don't sell a fantasy version of myself to the public while being something completely different in private. And what exactly do you think I am in private? Reese's voice was quiet now, but it carried an intensity that seemed to fill the entire studio. Because I'd really love to know what version of me you've constructed in your head. The one that justifies this ambush you apparently planned for today. Joy seemed momentarily thrown by the direct confrontation, but recovered quickly. I think you're someone who has been famous since you were a teenager, someone who has never really had to struggle, never really had to fight for anything. You were handed opportunities that other actresses, other women would kill for. And now you've repackaged that privilege as empowerment and sold it back to the very women who will never have the chances you had. The accusation of being handed success struck something deep in Ree. Her expression shifted from controlled anger to something more complex, more personal. Never had to struggle? You think I've never had to struggle? Her laugh was short and bitter. I got pregnant at 23. I was a single mother trying to build a career in an industry that writes women off the moment they show any sign of having a life outside of being desirable. I fought for every role, every opportunity, every seat at the table that men assume was theirs by right. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on Joy's face. You want to know what struggle looks like in Hollywood? Struggle is being told you're too old at 35. Struggle is watching male actors your age get paired with women 20 years younger while you're offered the role of someone's mother. Struggle is building a production company because no one else was going to make the stories you wanted to tell. Joy tried to interrupt, but Reese wasn't finished. And you know what? Yes, I've been privileged in many ways. I'm white. I'm blonde. I fit a certain standard that this industry rewards. I've never pretended otherwise. But instead of just accepting those privileges and coasting on them, I've tried to use them to open doors for people who don't look like me, who didn't have the same advantages. How convenient, Joy said with a smirk. The privileged woman using her privilege to help others. That's a very comfortable position to be in, isn't it? You get to feel good about yourself while still benefiting from the same system that keeps other women down. And what would you have me do instead? Ree shot back, her voice rising. Give back my Oscar. Shut down my company. Stop making content that puts women's stories front and center. Would that make you more comfortable? Joy, if I just disappeared and stopped being a reminder that some women actually accomplish things. The counterattack was fierce enough to make Joy blink. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? Because I've been sitting here trying to figure out what would satisfy you. What would I have to do or be for you to consider me legitimate? Is there any amount of success that's acceptable for a woman to have? Or does achievement itself make us suspect in your eyes? The questions were pointed and clearly struck something. Joy's expression flickered with something that might have been uncertainty. I'm just asking questions that people want answered, Joy said defensively. Are you? Or are you projecting your own discomfort with successful women onto millions of viewers who never ask for this interrogation? Because I've done a lot of interviews, Joy. A lot. And I've never had someone so determined to make me apologize for being good at what I do. Ree stood up, and the movement seemed to startle everyone in the studio. She wasn't walking away. She was just refusing to have this conversation sitting down anymore. You know what I find fascinating about this conversation, Joy? You've spent the last 15 minutes attacking me for being successful, for building something, for trying to use whatever influence I have to make things better for other women. And what's your contribution been? Sitting at a table and tearing down the women who actually do things. The question hung in the air like an accusation. Joy's face went through several shades of red. I've been doing important journalism for decades, Joy protested. I've given voice to issues that matter. I've challenged powerful people. Have you, or have you just been entertaining? Because there's a difference. Joy. Challenging powerful people means taking on systems, fighting for change, putting something on the line. What you do is take pot shots at celebrities because it's safe. Because we're trained to smile and take it because fighting back makes us look difficult. She gestured around the studio. Well, I'm done smiling and taking it. I came here to talk about a project I'm proud of. And instead, I've been subjected to a character assassination based on one mistake I made a decade ago and the apparent crime of being successful while female. Whoopi tried to intervene. I think Joy was just trying to have a real conversation. Was she? Ree turned to Whoopi, her voice still carrying that dangerous edge because it didn't feel like a conversation. It felt like a prosecution. And I'd like to know what exactly I'm being prosecuted for. For making money, for building businesses, for not being sufficiently apologetic about my success. She turned back to Joy. You asked earlier if my feminism is real or just marketing. Let me answer that question directly. I believe that women have been held back, held down, and held to different standards than men for all of human history. I believe that's wrong. And I believe that every woman who succeeds, who builds something, who refuses to apologize for her ambition, makes it a little bit easier for the women who come after her. Her voice was rising with passion. Now that's not a brand, Joy. That's a belief. And I've backed it up with action, with my money, with my time, with my choices about what stories to tell and whose voices to amplify. What have you backed your beliefs up with besides criticism of women who are actually in the arena? The reference to the famous Theodore Roosevelt quote about critics and those in the arena was pointed and clearly intentional. Joy's expression had shifted from aggressive to defensive. I don't have to justify my career to you, Joy said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. No, you don't, just like I don't have to justify mine to you. But you came at me today with accusations and insinuations, and that incident from 2013 that you've clearly been waiting to throw in my face. So, let's be clear about what happened here. You ambushed me, and now that I'm not playing the grateful guest, you're uncomfortable. She re-straightened her blazer with deliberate precision. I've been in this industry since I was 14 years old. I've been underestimated, overlooked, written off, and dismissed more times than I can count. I've also been celebrated, rewarded, and given opportunities that I know others deserve just as much. Both things are true. Life is complicated. People are complicated. But what I won't do is apologize for working hard and succeeding. She looked at the audience directly. To every woman watching who has ever been made to feel bad about her success, who has ever been told that her ambition was unseemly, who has ever had her achievements attributed to luck or privilege or anything other than her own hard work, I want you to hear something. Don't let anyone make you small. Don't let anyone convince you that you don't deserve what you've earned. And don't let anyone tell you that succeeding while female is something that requires an apology. She turned back to Joy one final time. I've won an Oscar. I've built a production company that's changed the kinds of stories Hollywood tells. I've raised 3 children while doing it. I've failed publicly and gotten back up. I've made mistakes and learned from them. That's my life, Joy. It's not perfect, and I've never claimed it was, but it's mine, and I'm proud of it. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Reese held up her hand. I'm not finished. You wanted to know if the real me is different from the public me. Here's your answer. The real me is someone who grew up in Nashville with big dreams and the determination to make them happen. The real me is someone who has fought through an industry that treats women as disposable commodities. The real me is someone who got tired of waiting for permission and decided to create her own opportunities. Her voice softened slightly, but lost none of its power. The real me is also someone who makes mistakes, who said something stupid to a police officer when she was scared and embarrassed, who has had moments of arrogance and moments of doubt, who has struggled with the weight of expectations and the fear of failure. That's the real me. Human, flawed, still trying. She picked up her bag with the same determination she brought to everything. But here's what the real me isn't, Joy. The real me isn't someone who tears down other women to make herself feel better. The real me isn't someone who mistakes cynicism for intelligence. And the real me isn't someone who's going to sit here and be a punching bag so you can feel edgy and relevant. She started toward the edge of the set, then stopped and turned back. You know what I've learned in 30 years in this business? The people who spend their time criticizing others rarely build anything themselves. It's easy to sit in judgment. It's hard to create something. It's easy to point out flaws. It's hard to put yourself out there, knowing you'll be judged for every imperfection. Her gaze swept across the panel. I've spent my career putting myself out there, taking risks, failing publicly sometimes, succeeding publicly sometimes. And through it all, I've tried to do some good along the way. If that makes me a fraud in your eyes, Joy, then I guess I'll just have to live with your disapproval. She smiled, but it wasn't the megawatt smile the world knew. It was something smaller, more personal, almost sad. My mama always told me that you can't control what people say about you. You can only control who you actually are. I know who I am. I know what I've done and what I'm still trying to do. And at the end of the day, that's enough for me. I hope someday it's enough for you too. And with that, Reese Witherspoon walked off the set of The View, leaving behind a studio that seemed to vibrate with the aftermath of what had just happened. The audience sat in stunned silence, many of them clearly moved by what they had witnessed. Several women were wiping tears from their eyes. Others were nodding slowly, as if they had just heard someone articulate something they had felt their entire lives, but never had the words for. The other hosts looked shell-shocked. Sarah Haynes was staring at the spot where Reese had been sitting. Sunny Hostin was looking at Joy with an expression that was impossible to read, but clearly wasn't approval. And Joy Behar sat at the table looking smaller somehow than she had at the beginning of the interview, like someone who had just realized that the target she had chosen was made of much stronger stuff than she had anticipated. What had started as a promotional appearance had become something far more significant. A woman who had spent her career being called sweet and likable had shown the steel beneath the smile. And she had reminded everyone watching that being positive doesn't mean being passive, and that the most powerful response to an attack is sometimes simply refusing to accept the terms of the battle. The aftermath of that interview would dominate entertainment news for weeks. Clips of Reese's powerful defense of her life and career would be shared millions of times. Women across America would respond with their own stories of being made to feel ashamed of their success. And somewhere in the conversation, a larger truth would emerge about how we treat ambitious women, how we demand that they be successful, but not too successful, confident, but not too confident, proud, but always appropriately humble. Reese Witherspoon had never been particularly interested in being appropriate. She had been interested in being effective. And on that day, in that studio, she had been devastatingly, unforgettably effective. Not by shouting or losing her temper, but by simply telling the truth about who she was and refusing to apologize for any of it. For those who had grown up watching Elle Woods prove that you could be feminine and fierce, who had cheered when June Carter told Johnny Cash she'd been walking the line for him, who had seen their own complicated relationships reflected in Big Little Lies, there was something deeply satisfying about watching Reese Witherspoon show the same steel that had made all those characters memorable. She had proven that. The optimism wasn't naivety, that the Southern charm wasn't weakness, and that the smile could disappear when someone pushed too far. And somewhere in that studio, Joy Behar was learning what countless Hollywood executives had learned before her. Underestimating Reese Witherspoon was always a mistake. She hadn't become one of the most powerful women in entertainment by being sweet. She had done it by being smart, by being strategic, and by never ever letting anyone make her feel small for daring to succeed. What do you think about this incredible confrontation? Was Joy Behar out of line, or was she asking questions that needed to be asked? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to like and subscribe Unforgettable Endings Stories for more stories.